The Richie Allen Show, live on Talk Radio Europe, Fab Radio International, and DavidIke.com. And now, live from Manchester, England, here is Richie Allen.
Earlier today, when I say earlier today, just before I came on air, I caught up with a remarkable woman and a human being, somebody I love a lot. I've had some very interesting interviews with her over the years. There were a couple where we ended up shouting at one another and disagreeing on things, but she's a true independent and somebody who I think you can take her to the bank, you know, every day of the week. You can take what she says to the bank. She is the first African-American woman to ever be elected to Congress from the state of Georgia. She served 2 terms. She's a former Green Party nominee for President of the United States. I will never forget her thundering away at Donald Rumsfeld about Pentagon spending way back when. You can find it on YouTube, grilling him in a way that sadly doesn't happen anymore. Her name is Cynthia McKinney. She's in the Southern Hemisphere, and I caught up with her earlier, I keep saying earlier today, later this afternoon, just before I came on air, and this is how that went. Well, good evening, Cynthia McKinney. How are you?
Well, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad at all. Now, 3 months ago was the last time you and I spoke, and you've been in the Far East or the Middle East, let's say the Southern Hemisphere. And I know you've been teaching there. I know you were working on your own dissertation and everything, and it was all going very well. And I give you a call today to say, Ms. McKinney, I want to get your opinion on Ukraine and Syria. And lo and behold, you're still there. McKinney, are you growing roots in the Southern Hemisphere or what?
I think my roots were always in the Southern Hemisphere. Somehow I just got teleported up to the north, right?
Yeah.
So, but there have been some changes, some modest changes. My dissertation final version has been accepted. And in really any day now, it will be published. And once it's published, I am done. Actually, I'm totally done now. I'm 100% done. And I'm just waiting for the librarian to reach me wherever she is in the queue and publish my dissertation. And of course, I'll send you the link as soon as I have it.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. And you're a young woman. I'm not patronizing you in saying that. You're a young woman, but you're a shining example to everybody. Learning never stops. It doesn't matter whether you're 25 and you didn't go to college, or you're an experienced, educated, 2-time congresswoman like you. It never stops. No, I mean that sincerely. I'm 40 now. I did a degree years ago. I'm thinking about, educating myself. I'm thinking about doing something different, and you're definitely an example. I was thinking to myself before giving you a call. Do you feel this week when you hear Lindsey Graham? Now, I don't think I've ever sworn or used bad language around you, and I certainly don't do it around ladies in general. But Lindsey Graham must be either batshit crazy or he's serious and he's convincing people. We've been playing clips of him in the last few days saying that we should never leave the Middle East. We should arm the Ukrainian government, help them as best as we can, and all of this. The nightly news channels are talking to Republican presidential nominees. Now, as a former presidential nominee yourself, you'll find this interesting. They're developing amnesia about what happened in Iraq, it seems, because, it wasn't such a bad idea now, and maybe we did it wrong. Maybe we should have stayed there. The old war machine is ramping up again. And I was thinking about you, and I was thinking, because you lived through it, do you sometimes feel that you've walked out of your house and you've actually stepped back in time to 2001? How does that feel?
Oh, well, it doesn't feel good at all. And I can tell you, I've been just posting on my Facebook page. I just, said, President Obama, with the announcement of the deployment of troops into Iraq once again, it's the backbone of a squid. I just, really, we shouldn't expect anything different, because those people who have control of the apparatus of the state and are in a position to use the military at their whim for their own petty pecuniary purposes, we should expect them to do so. But it's up to the people of the United States to stop this madness. And if they don't stop the madness, it'll only get worse.
Now, I mentioned Graham, and of course you're right, it'll get worse. I mentioned Graham, I mentioned O'Reilly, and forget O'Reilly, Meet the Press. We had a former, I can't remember who it was now for the life of me, Cynthia, but a former CIA, one of the former heads of the CIA on Meet the Press recently, and he was saying, if we debate, while we're having debates about national security, while we're debating whether or not the NSA should be allowed to listen to anybody's phones at any time of the day, whether they want it or not, we shouldn't be debating all that sort of stuff because the terrorists, it suits them and all this nonsense. And, I consider myself a pretty decent journalist. I'm not the greatest journalist that ever lived. I'm not the worst. I'm going to jump in there, Cynthia, and I'm going to say to the guy, are you really telling people that we shouldn't be discussing these things because any sort of debate helps ISIS or whomever? But of course, the presenter just sits there and nods along and smiles and thanks the guy for coming on and then moves on to something else. And of course, that's largely responsible for why there isn't revolt in the United States on these matters, is it? Am I right?
Well, you're right that the media have completely abdicated their responsibility to tell the truth, but that didn't just happen today or yesterday. That's been going on for a very long time. Since the creation of the Office of Special Services, the OSS, which is the predecessor of the CIA, the media have walked in lockstep with the deepest parts of the deep state of the United States. And when I say deep state, of course, Dr. Peter Dale Scott was a member of my dissertation committee, and he is the one who has formulated this notion of the deep state, which consists of individuals who have an unusual level of access to policy making. And so it's a set of individuals who can determine whether or not, and when and where the United States military is going to be activated. That is not a set of policies that really emanates from me or my next door neighbor, but instead comes from, again, those petty pecuniary interests of certain individuals who can say, okay, I want to get that diamond mine over there. Let's send some troops over there.
Yeah, that's it. And that brings us neatly to the situation. By the way, the CIA director I was thinking of, it must have been John Brennan. I can't think of anybody else. It must have been Brennan. Yeah, Brennan was saying we shouldn't be debating and spending all our time worrying about whether it's right for the NSA to do this, because while we're wasting our time doing this and that, is then ISIS sleeper cells and all of that. And of course, that's absolute rubbish. We heard about Al-Qaeda sleeper cells. They could never prove that any of those existed. They're telling the same lies again. And it's not only that, but it's the same liars telling the same lies again, and people are believing it. But as for the interests and the deep state, which I think is a fantastically, it's a great way to explain it, and it's an easy way for people to understand it. We obviously have to talk about Ukraine and the removal of Viktor Yanukovych by a coup backed by, of course, the Great Britain, where I am now, and the United States of America. Petro Poroshenko is put in, and then they start slipping people in then, as I've said many times on this programme every evening, like Natalie Jaresko, financier, US born and bred, even though she has Ukrainian ancestry. She says, first of all, we're going to take huge loans from the United States of America, big loans we're going to take. We'll get loan guarantees. We'll join the European Union, and we'll get Ukraine into NATO. None of that is untrue. And I mentioned to you coming on just before we came on there that none of this is hidden anymore, Cynthia. It's not hidden from people. It's obvious that they're sent in there to skim, to use that great phrase, to skim the joint dry. That's what Ukraine and the situation there is all about, as well as encircling Russia with NATO military bases. It can't be anything else.
We've got some crazy people
Yeah.
who are part of the deep state, and they actually want to have hot war with Russia and with China, and they don't mind it at all. In the meantime, while you've got these crazy people who are amping up the propaganda, sort of preparing the people of the U.S. for their role in sufficiently hating the Chinese and hating the Russians. And of course, 1 billion people in China are reduced to a few individuals, and 300 million or so are reduced in Russia, are reduced to the personage of Vladimir Putin. So whatever happens to the rest of them is okay, because you're going to go out there and you're going to get Vladimir. So, we've got that kind of hysteria being whipped up. And as I was saying before, that the media have always been part and parcel of the U.S. war machine, and they've been utilized by the deep state. They are a part of the deep state. In fact, during the 1970s, when we were able to peer into the veneer of the deep state just a bit, and Senator Frank Church held hearings, we learned that there were thousands of journalists, publishing houses, news outlets, so-called news outlets that were on the payroll of the CIA. And you know that hasn't stopped. It's still there. It's still happening under a different name. It's not COINTELPRO any longer. It's something else. It's the Pentagon has the Office of Perception Management. And so it's the same thing under a different name. And so we shouldn't even expect to get the truth from the media. Or for that matter, we shouldn't even expect to get information. If, in fact, we get our information from CNN and Fox and all, and that's all we do, we use without any critical analysis of what we're getting, then we're misinformed.
And we're doomed if that's the case. You're absolutely right. We are. I can't not mention, because our listeners will remember you famously hammering away at Donald Rumsfeld, marvellous, real politics. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. Amazing stuff. Of course, it was announced in the last couple of days that, and this is staggering stuff, Cynthia, that the Pentagon have lost track. We all remember, of course, September the 10th and Rumsfeld saying we lost 2.3 trillion. But as of 2015, they're saying since 1996, they've lost or can't account for the bones of $8.5 trillion. Now, I'm certainly no economist. I know very little about money. I have all sorts of opinions on the Federal Reserve and on central banks, as you do. But 8.5 trillion is not far off half of the current alleged US national deficit. It's amazing, Cynthia. I like to think there was a time once when that sort of news would cause riots. And I don't mean riots where people are beating one another up, but riots where people just march to DC and tell these people, your time is up now. Your time is done. Are you really telling us that while people are starving, while you're cutting welfare payments, while you're criminalising African Americans, while you're brutalising people with the police, you're telling us that you just lost $8.5 trillion and hey-ho, pass the butter, let's just get on with life. It's hard to remain peaceful, you know that? I find myself getting enraged the more I think about this sort of stuff and the more they seem to be getting away with it. How do you stay calm?
Well, we should be outraged, and more people should be outraged. People in the United States should be outraged. Back when I was grilling Rumsfeld, it was 2.3 plus 1.1, I believe.
Yeah.
And so now it's up to 8 something, and it will only. Now let me just tell you that
you're on Rumsfeld,
transactions. Yeah. Those transactions is not like the money was lost. No, the money was not lost. Those were transactions. Somebody got it. The question is, who is getting it? At the same time, we've got infrastructure that needs to be repaired and rebuilt. We've got people who are losing their homes. We've got veterans and other people who are homeless. We've got the mentally ill who are mistreated and put in jails and they need to be treated. We've got people who are saddled with student loan debt just because they want to have an education and contribute to society in some kind of meaningful way. We've got people who are we've got the insurance industry that's being gifted by the Obama administration through Obamacare.
Yeah.
And that's being confused with health care. So we've got the people of the United States desperately need that money and they need that attention. And, the United States Congress is off in la-la land.
It is. And the last time you were on, by the way, the last time you came on with us, I mean, you know that we don't do any bragging, but at the moment we're about the most listened to alternative news radio show in Europe because we're going out on so many networks and on davidike.com. We've got an enormous listenership. And the YouTube video and the podcast of you talking about APAC the last time you were on with us and the corruption there and all of that, it went absolutely viral. Tens and tens of thousands of people saw it. And just briefly going back to Ukraine before I talk about something, because I want to get your opinion on a couple of other stories. I won't keep you all day because I know you got things to do there and it's late evening there now. But you talk about, and you were quite right to correct me, by the way. I should never have said lost. It wasn't money lost by the Pentagon. It was money used in transactions. So it wasn't lost. It ended up somewhere. And I'm thinking today, Cynthia, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, as you know, is a guy called Arseniy Yatsenyuk. And he announced in the last couple of days that Ukraine will sell the country's state-owned companies to the United States. Now, just leaving aside for 1 second that people should be outraged, because here's definitive proof of the coup, that the coup took place to get rid of Yanukovych, democratically elected president, put in Poroshenko. Here it is now. They're just saying it out loud. We're going to do that. Now, all those Ukrainian people who say that they're pissed off with Russia and they don't want to go back to the old Soviet Union ways and we don't want to be bossed by Russia and all of that, okay, fair enough. But surely, in a sane world, why are you not up in arms that your Prime Minister is talking about selling companies to the United States? First of all, privatising state assets is crazy. But let's just say for a minute, Cynthia, that it's okay to do that. Why, in the name of Jesus, excuse me if people are offended at my blaspheming there, why are they not screaming at the guy saying, why not put those companies up for bidding? Why don't you allow other countries have a say? Surely you're not getting top dollar if you're just deciding to sell to the United States. Cynthia, am I going mad? What's going on? It's mental, isn't it?
Well, this is it's no different. It's the same people who stripped Russia of all of their assets. And, in the end, they engineered the sell-off of Russian assets at that time, in the switch between the Soviet Union and Russia. And it's up to Vladimir Putin, who's taking it back on behalf of the Russian people. So the same people now, they're vultures and, they've gone over to Ukraine and they're doing the same thing. And now our president has delivered some military vehicles to Ukraine. They're actually inside Ukraine now. I can believe it. I can believe anything that happens now because we've gone into the theater of the absurd.
Go to Cynthia McKinney's Facebook page. You've only got to look for Cynthia McKinney and you'll see those pictures she's talking about. She's absolutely right. And isn't it funny, Cynthia, you're talking about the media demonisation of Putin. Look, he's no angel. All of these top guys, they're all corrupt. They all do dodgy deals. We know that. But they're demonising Putin. And at the same time, as they're doing it, in the last couple of weeks, there's been several big editorials in the Washington Post and in the New York Times. You're going to laugh. You may have seen them, you may not have, because, as I said, you're not in the US at the moment. But that Nicolas Maduro, he's some bastard now, Cynthia. How dare he take back all those things that we stole from Venezuela over the last 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 decades, whatever it is. So now we get all these stories about Maduro, about how he's shutting down the state media, how he's locking people away who are dissenting against him. They offer no proof of any of this, by the way, but it's the same old crap that they're trying to sell to people. And it's basically people who stand up to this evil hegemony, isn't it? It's basically the same, and that's what it is with Putin. How dare you stand up and renationalise assets or take stuff back from us? So what we'll do is we will stir things up. We will make fake orange revolutions. We'll send people in there to destabilise the government, as I believe they've been doing to Maduro in Caracas. They've got their agents on the ground in there working against him. And when he's arresting people, the chances are these people are agents of the United States. What do you make of all of that?
He needs to arrest them, every one of them, and more. And be very aggressive about it. Anyone who would dare take money and heaven knows what else from the United States for the purpose of destabilizing their own country needs to be, they need to have justice served to them. So I agree with what Maduro is doing in order to protect the Bolivarian revolution.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, we would hope that Maduro would act within international law and human rights laws, that people would be treated properly, that they would be, treated as if they were innocent until proven guilty, given a fair hearing and all of that. We've got to say that as well. But yes, I can't argue with any of that. Got to mention this to you. In New York City, over the last few days, Yair Lapid, a former Israeli finance minister, he's allegedly very hawkish. I only know a little bit about him. I don't know a lot about him anyway. He attended a Jerusalem Post conference in New York, and he said that the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign, he said, against Israel, it's basically outright anti-Semitism, he said, and he equated the people who support the boycott movement with the people who brought down the Twin Towers. I swear to God, he did say that. You might be aware of that. I played a clip of it on the show last night. Rather than get annoyed with his blatant, madness and craziness and all of that, I thought to myself, do you know what, Cynthia? This is good. The BDS movement must be hurting. It must be getting somewhere. What do you think? Well,
I've seen extreme reaction on the part of Israel. And in fact, the other day, Sheldon Adelson had a secret meeting that, of course, is no longer secret, to plot and plan how to, basically what they want to do is equate BDS with anti-Semitism so they can stop people in their tracks. And then, of course, there's also the effort to replicate what's been done in Europe, and that is to criminalize any criticism of Israel. So these people, even though they can march for freedom of speech and say, Je suis Charlie, they don't tolerate very much freedom of speech from anyone other than themselves.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And of course, we have to mention, while mentioning that the Canadian Prime Minister, Harper, of course, he's trying to, and talking about introducing legislation to criminalise the support of such movements. And these are scary times, and I don't know how the media is reporting on that in Canada, if indeed it is at all. But, you cannot allow that. You cannot allow your leader, an elected official whom you elected, tell you that you can't act on a point of conscience and say, well, I'm not going to buy that bit of fruit because it was grown inside Israel. I'm going to do that on conscience. You cannot allow somebody bring into legislation or bring into law that that's a anti-Semitism or that's a racist act. Were you disappointed that the United Nations, I suppose we're not surprised at all, it's a nonsense organisation now, but that Ban Ki-moon didn't list Israel on the list of countries who, have caused harm and death to children in warfare? I suppose you're not surprised by that at all, even though 500 Palestinian kids were blown to pieces last year. What do you reckon?
Well, we've long known that the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon in particular, I wonder, when was the last time the United Nations actually had a Secretary General? But Ban Ki-moon has not done anything that would displease his U.S. sponsors. And of course, the United States is walking hand in glove with the Israelis. And so therefore, we don't expect justice or fairness or anything like that. We don't even expect the United Nations to live up to its own Declaration of Human Rights, as its so-called peacekeepers are raping with impunity in Haiti.
I want to finish on it's all true. I want to finish on a couple of things. First of all, I want to ask you, where do you think, it's a very general question this is now, but with respect to this, this campaign against IS and 400, allegedly 400, might be more, I don't know, troops going to Iraq to help train the Iraqi soldiers. Again, I'm thinking I've heard this song before somewhere, I just can't remember where, and all of that, and the meddling in Ukraine and sending the equipment that you demonstrated to be true on your social media, on your Facebook today. Where is it all going to end, this, Cynthia? I mean, we don't do fear porn on the programme. Do you think that it very well might end in a protracted, very serious conflict? Or is this just posturing and messing around, it's going to go on forever? Or what? How do you see it?
It's not posturing because, people are losing their lives. People are being dispossessed of their homes. I've been to Syria, and you've got millions of Syria outside of Syria. At the same time, you've got millions that are inside Syria displaced, and so they're living in internal displaced camps. And the same thing for Libya, and the same thing goes for Iraq. And so what we're witnessing is Arab genocide. And after they finish with the Arab genocide, then they're going to move on to the Muslim genocide. And from the Muslim genocide, they're going to move on to the Christian genocide. And then they'll move on from the Christian genocide to the Hindu genocide and the Buddhist genocide. And, it's just, it's never going to stop.
Do you have sympathy, since you're just on that, and I won't dwell too much on this because our time is nearly up. Do you have sympathy with opinions? And I should be honest, opinions like mine, for example, that this is a very, 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 very sinister thing that ultimately involves mass depopulation. And, we talk about things like Agenda 21 on this, but you know what this programme is about. We talk about all sorts of things. Do you have sympathy with that opinion, Cynthia? That this is a little bit more evil and a little bit more dark and deep than most people imagine. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the fact is that people are losing their lives in the masses. This is not just a one or two thing here and one over there. We've got genocide taking place on the African continent. We've got genocide taking place in Asia. And the only place there isn't genocide taking place is in Europe.
Yeah, at the moment.
Yeah.
At the moment. Got to leave on this. We'll finish on this for the laugh. We mentioned your old nemesis, Rumsfeld, earlier on in the chat. Got to mention this. You probably are aware of this, but he's entered revisionist room 101 as good old Rummy. He's now telling anybody who listen that he was pretty sceptical about the successes of any invasion in Iraq prior to 2003. There's no level of lies that these guys won't tell, Cynthia, is there? I mean, I have a long memory. I remember what this guy was saying pre, during and after the invasion, and he certainly never expressed any doubts that it might succeed. What do you think?
Yeah, they're liars. We know they're liars, and we shouldn't believe a word they say.
End of story. Listen, I can't wait to read your dissertation when it comes out. Thanks for sparing the time for this programme. We love having you on, and Godspeed to you, continued success to you, and I'm sure in the autumn we'll catch up again. Cynthia McKinney, always a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This is the public perception which needs to change, and I completely understand why this perception is held by people. They judge the number of children that go missing by the number of missing children stories on the mainstream news, in the mainstream media. So Madeleine McCann, a big story, yeah. Madeleine McCann is the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip of the tip, and I could go on for hours, of the iceberg.
But as long as we allow the psychopaths who run the world to have an infinite supply of money, they will continue to supply us with an infinite dose of absolute nutcase, totally servile, disgusting, amoral son of a bitches who will support whatever script and agenda they put in front of them. And that's what we have.
The Boston Marathon and the Boston Marathon bombing a couple of years back, and while watching it he came to the conclusion that it was a staged production. So Nathan Folks will be talking to us a bit later on in the programme. It's also been David Icke's birthday this week. It's no big secret that I'm a close friend of Dave. AlanShow.com/donate, and you can use PayPal, or there are bank account details there if you want to use those, but please do consider helping to keep the programme on the air. It's a terrifically successful programme, I can say that without any ego to this point. It's getting an enormous audience, and it's going out on more and more and more networks. In fact, we're adding networks all the time, so I need your help to keep it going. At the moment, no sponsorship, entirely listener funded. Go to richiealanshow.com/donate and make a contribution if you can. Thank you for doing it.